Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. This is your host, Amina Ahmed, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Welcome back to another episode of NextGen. On this week's theme of humanitarian crises, this is actually week 2 of humanitarian crises. We spoke on the Yemen issue and the Palestinian issue, the Uyghur issue, the situation of minorities in India, and yesterday we spoke on the Syrian crisis. But the issue we'll be speaking on today is one that is of an ethnic cleansing, a genocide that is ongoing of the Rohingya population. We're there on Galaxy 19 satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and soon on Apple TV as well. The Rohingyas are a Muslim population, a majority group in Burma, who have had to face brutal, long years of discrimination. They have faced violence, denial of citizenship, and numerous restrictions by the hands of the Burmese government. Most recently, they are facing an ethnic cleansing. Their population has suffered mass atrocities, violence at the hands of their own government. We're seeing a genocide that's being intensified and it's ongoing. We're in the second phase of that genocide. And close to 1 million Rohingya are stateless currently. They reside in 34 extremely constricted campsites, including the largest single site, Katapalung, which is in Bangladesh, and it hosts 600,000 of the Rohingya population. Actually, today we have with us a survivor of those camps, a survivor of the Rohingya genocide, a man who has lived in this camp for 8 years of his life, Sirazul Islam. It's an absolute honor for us to have you with us today.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and I hope you're all doing well in this uncertain times. And thank you to Amina for the introduction.
Yeah, and Siraz, that's not enough of an introduction. You are a genocide survivor. You're someone who has spent 8 years of your life in these camps before moving to the UK. Since then, you're studying law and you're an advocate and activist for your people, for the Rohingya population. Thank you for being with us today. I want you to tell us, our audience, about your unique experiences, your circumstance of, being Rohingya. You grew up in Bangladesh and now you live in the UK. That's insane. Tell us about
that. Yeah, so I think most of the Rohingyas and other ethnic minorities that move into diaspora communities, what they have is an identity crisis, and the other panelists on this show would agree with me, because I'm a Burmese Rohingya. I grew up in Bangladesh refugee camp. I've been stateless in my entire life until I was 18, and then I moved to the UK, and now it's been nearly 12 years in December. So when people ask me where do I come from, what's your identity, when I told them I'm a Rohingya, I come from Burma, no one knew who the Rohingyas were. No one knew where Burma even was on the map before the 2017 crisis. Until today, a lot of people still do not know what's going on inside Burma. So it's been really difficult for me to grow up with the identity of a Rohingya, a young Rohingya, because for my entire life I've had to explain to people why I am and why I'm in this position, or why certain things are certain way. It's like a lot of a quote that many people from the camps use is the Rohingya people, when they're born, they feel like they're born a crime, because everywhere they go, they're either made stateless, even though they do have a state. Their state is Arakan, the Rakhine state. They've been forced to leave their home, and in Bangladesh, they're living in as refugees. So for their entire life, nothing is legal in the sense of, in a logistical sense, nothing is legal in their life. So I was born in the camps. In 2008, I stayed in Kutupalong refugee camp in Bangladesh till 2008, and my life within the camps was like an open prison. And I say this because we weren't allowed to move, we weren't allowed to climb up the social ladder, we weren't allowed to mobilize, we weren't allowed to do anything. If I'm being frank, we had no job prospect, we had no life prospect. And I say this because, for example, within the educational system, we have learning centers. The Rohingyas are not allowed to go outside of the camps to go study in Bangladeshi schools. So they have learning centers within the camps, And these learning centers are the most minimal learning environment. For example, um, the criteria, the curriculum, the subjects are very limited, and it's as if the teachers or the authorities don't put enough effort in to teach the Rohingyas, um, and give access to their education. And many people say this. The reason for this is that um, the Bangladeshi authorities don't want the Rohingyas to excel. They want to keep them at a level where they're refugees. They don't want them to integrate with host communities or go outside of the camps. And this is one of the reasons. And another example is that we're not allowed to take up jobs. We don't have to. We have no absolute prospect whatever. And this is no exaggeration in any sense. The Rohingyas are so trapped and are so limited in their life that they cannot move, they cannot go out and seek work. All they have is stay at home, stay in the camps continuously for their entire life. For example, my grandma and my uncle, they have been in the camp for 30 years now. My parents and my elder brother, they have been in the camp for 18 years, and I, 8 years. So this is a generational crisis. You can see there's three generations for me: 8, 18, and 30. For the entire time in the camp, we weren't allowed to move. My grandma still till this day has not visited. She can't go outside of the camp. My uncle cannot go outside of the camp. He has no job. He has no prospect. So the reason this is dangerous is because we have to go back to our own community. We have to go back to our own land one day in Burma. And when we go back, we would be illiterate. We would be uneducated, and this would make the Rohingyas a burden on the Burmese community, which would all along prove their claim that we're illegal immigrants, and that we don't add anything to the Burmese society, which is untrue. Because, as you can see, I study law at the University of Manchester. I have fellow Rohingya people who are footballers, cricketers, pilots, doctors, engineers. If we're given the opportunity, we can excel in every part of life. And this was my entire life in the camps. I lived in a 8 foot by 7 foot, 8 feet by 7 feet shelter made of bamboo sticks for a family of seven. So you can imagine the condition that we lived in. We had to share a toilet, a public toilet, with 40 other people, with 10 other families. We had to share we had to share places for us to bathe with other families, with other people. And you can see there's open sewers, sanitation problems, every aspect, every article of our human rights we have not received as of yet. We have been violated with all our human rights. For example, the right to freedom. We have no freedom in the camps. We have no freedom in Burma. The right to speech. We cannot speak openly about our condition in Bangladesh. We cannot speak openly about our experiences, about the things going on in Burma. We can't mobilize to help our people. Right to education. There's nothing. The education system is abysmal, and it is so inadequate that it would not help anyone, and it stops at the age of 12. At the age of 12, the education system is limited, is capped. And to show you how inadequate the educational system is, and I keep talking about education because it is a passion of mine, because education can change the world, and our community has suffered from lack of education for generations, because because of the apartheid system in Burma. We weren't allowed to go to schools, we weren't allowed to go to universities, and this is the same case in Bangladesh. There's a network of Rohingya teachers that migrated from Burma into refugee camps, and they have taken it upon themselves to teach the curriculum based on what they learned in Burma. So now that shows you why should they have to do this if there was an adequate system? So you can see the different comparison. And yeah, so that has been my entire life. Uh, when I came to the UK as an 8-year-old, I didn't know the alphabets. of the
Wow.
English lexicon. I didn't know anything. I couldn't speak English. I like if I see an 8 year old now, they could do addition, subtraction. I didn't even know what division, addition, subtraction was when I was 8.
So that
I
just
didn't know the
shows.
alphabet.
Yeah, that just shows how inadequate the education system over there was.
True.
And I want to bring our other activist into this conversation as well because I know that she's also, she has Burmese roots. Her parents are immigrants. Jan Jan Miran, thank you for being with us, Jan Jan.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me on here. I'm so honored and grateful to be able to be a spokesperson in a sense.
No,
So,
it's a
yeah.
pleasure for us to have you. And Jan Jan is passionate about raising awareness about Burma issues. Her parents are Kachin immigrants from Burma, and she's involved with organizations such as Stand Action Corps, the Burmese Alliance, where she serves in the Burmese Action Committees, and she plays an essential part in all of these organizations. And Jan Jan, I want to ask you, right? As you're not Rohingya, but you are from Burma. So how has that identity kind of influenced you to speak up for the Rohingya people, even though you are not Rohingya?
Yeah, definitely. So growing up a Kachin American, I'm really grateful that I was able to be in a community that was actually with a Burmese church community. So I am exposed to all different types of ethnic groups as well, not only Kachin people, but also like other ethnic groups such as like Chin, Shan, Karen. Well, not exactly Shan, but just Karen and Chin and like a lot of the other different kinds. So it gives me an idea of how diverse Burma really is, and it allows me to see and not exactly cluster, but just like speak on behalf of all the people, no matter how diverse you are, no matter what ethnic group you come from, because at the end of the day, everyone is suffering under the same exact kind of attacks of the Burmese military. So yeah, it's crazy to see how there's a lot of divisions even within these ethnic groups back at home in Myanmar. And for me, as an Kitchen American, I can say that it's definitely more easy for me to see things from an objective lens and not be kind of as influenced as people who actually come straight from Myanmar. Because when you grow up there, you're definitely influenced by sort of racist ideologies. It's just kind of infiltrated in you as a youngling. Like you don't even know it. It's like a lot of people are unaware of it, and even if they are aware, it's hard for them to overcome these sort of racist notions and racist ideologies, like especially casting out or like looking down on people of darker skin color, which tends to be like Rohingya people, for example, or any Indians in the society, especially. So yeah, like I'm really grateful for my upbringing. It's very unique, like you said, and it definitely gives me that objectivity that is so needed for this work. So
Yeah.
like we can all collaborate together.
Yeah, for sure. I think allyship is definitely one of the main goals, and it should be obviously. But many of our viewers may not be familiar with who the Rohingya even are, right? With Sarazo's kind of experience, they got to see an insight as to what Rohingyas are living like after they had to flee their country. But can we go back to why, the causes of all of this, the causes of the crisis, who the Rohingya are, and what is the conflict that they're facing in Burma today? Can you guys tell us about that?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll start off a little bit, and seriously, you can feel free to add on, but in any time. Basically, Burma was a colonized country. It was under the British for about a century, and after they were colonized by the British, you basically had all these different ethnic groups merged together under one nation, which really wasn't a nation before the British came and colonized. So yeah, it just brought about kind of like a confused sense of what the identity for the nation was going to be, because not everyone was really together before. And after the British left, the Burman majority took over in government. And so now you see, even till this day, 70 plus years, the Burmese dominated majority government is still trying to enforce their power over all these other ethnic minorities. And I quote minorities because they're not really minorities. Like, it's kind of like the same amount as Burmese people, you could say. Um, but yeah, they're just subjected under this government, which is why they are called minorities. And that includes Rohingya, as well as like my ethnic identity Kachin, which is in northern Burma, and as well as Karen, which is like in the southwestern part of the country, Chin, which is in the northwestern, and Shan in the northeastern. And there's so many other ethnic identities. I have to mention that there are actually over 135 ethnic groups, and only 135 of them are identified. There's more than that which are not identified, which includes the Rohingya, and many more that even I myself don't know about, and I still have to learn. So yeah, it's crazy to see how there's a lot of corruption within the government, because the government itself holds 1/3, like in the parliament, the military holds 1/3 of power within it. And I have to say, I might be going like back and forth. I'm so sorry for this, but in 1962 there was actually a coup where the military took over. So there wasn't actually like a democracy or like a government in place. It was just the military, and they were controlling everything from like the jade sector, which they still do to this day, and just everything, you know. And that's where you see all these like, you know, extrajudicial killings and just like mass torture, mass, you know, whatever. And it's just like basically the leaders that assumed power after the British left were mainly Burmese military generals, and they were uneducated. They just, you know, did however they pleased in order to profit for themselves the most and gain money without any like any care for like any of the ethnic nationalities inside the country.
How has, you know, like the Burmese government perpetuated all of this? How are they using? Is it military? You know, economically? How have they been able to push this genocide that's been going on for years now? Right? Isn't there any voices that are standing against what's happening there?
Yeah, I think Janjan put brilliantly the history of how the Burmese military came into power and how they're maintaining power. And in terms of answering your question, like Janjan said, before the election in parliament, the military holds 1/3 of the power already, 1/3 of the seats. So, and to change the constitution, you need 51% of seats. You need 51% of the power. So, in that sense, the military would never get outvoted. The military would never get out of power. So no one can change the constitution as of yet. And so you have the political side, which they're doing it from that point, that perspective. The military government controls all the major sectors of power, all the major sectors in Burma. For example, the Ministry of Defense, the Home Office, the Foreign Office. How we would have it divided. This is all controlled by the military, all the important bits, and like all the less relevant, all the less powerful seats go out to other parties. For example, the General Counsellor, like Aung San Suu Kyi, the amount of power she has in comparison to what the military has is very minimal, is very less. So you have that political side, and then you have the propaganda side. I'll speak in terms of the Rohingya crisis, and I think Janjan could fill in terms of all the ethnic minority crises. When it comes to propaganda, the two main focus, the two main frame that the military used were Islamophobia and xenophobia, and they use these two mechanisms to develop an understanding that the Rohingyas were illegal Bengali immigrants. And this started not just 10 years ago, not just 20 years ago, but a really long time ago, over 50 years ago. And it started off small, and systematically it grew. So it went just from a few having the beliefs that the Rohingyas were not ethnically from Burma to a majority of the country now believing in the propaganda, to the point Winnetou, the highest, one of the highest Buddhist monks that many people follow in Burma, he called Muslims. He connoted Muslims with ants, with infestation, and with diseases, and he used Islamophobia to fuel the entire country against the Rohingyas. And then they came in xenophobia as well. The idea that the Rohingyas were illegal Bengali immigrants, that we came in to take over the Rakhine state, which is very untrue, because the kingdom of Arakan itself had Rohingyas from the start. Before Burma, Arakan itself, the Rakhine state, was the kingdom of Rakhine. It had its own king, it had its own laws, and it had its own history. It had the Rakhine people, and you had the Rohingya people living in peace, living in harmony together. And then came the Burmese. The Burmese colonized Arakan, and then the British colonized Burmese. So in turn, Arakan kept on being a colony, being controlled by either the British or either the Burmese. And so when the British left without any say, with the British just left the country on its own without any separation of power, without any structure. So what happened was, like Janja mentioned, without at the risk of repeating the points already, there was a coup and the military came in control, and systematically they started killing people. Systematically they started the propaganda. So I spoke about the propaganda side. Now let's talk about the killings. Um, in After the military coup, already they started a clean nation operation against ethnic minorities, against the Rohingyas in specifically. So you can imagine what it was. The name of the operation was Operation Clean Nation. So it shows you already to what extent they're willing to go. They want to clean Rakhine State. They want to clean Burma of Rohingyas. And what happened was in 1979. They started killing Rohingyas. They started threatening them, forced labor, and they drove them out of Rakhine State into Bangladesh, which they were eventually repatriated back into Burma. And then Operation Clean Nation came into play in 1991. This was one of the first and biggest migration of Rohingyas, forced migration of Rohingyas. And this was when my parents also had to move. Before, to give you a context why they moved was, the military didn't just come into our houses and say, oh, go to Bangladesh or go travel. They did it systematically, so they didn't have to say anything, but because of the way they were treating people, they were forced to go. Slave labor, forced labor, killings, rapes, um, mutilations, and to give an example, they would mix chemicals in the waters, so Rohingya women cannot give birth. And this was the same for other ethnic minorities. What they would do, they would release HIV and other diseases. For example, they would get people who are positive for STIs or STDs, and they would release them into the Rohingya community. Sorry, and that in turn uh, spread the diseases around, so the Rohingyas couldn't reproduce. And another way, criminals. They would get criminals from outside of Rakhine State into Rohingya villages, and they would release them. And then they would use the excuse that, oh, the Rohingyas are criminals, or there's so much violence going on, and we're reacting to that violence. When in turn, it's them who are starting the violence. And that they're just a few examples of what I've given. And in '91, um, the Bangladesh refugee camps were established, and since then, my parents, my grandmother, and the entire family, most of the family, sorry, left for Rohingya refugee camp, and till this day, they have never been able to go back to camp. And this operation started in '91, 2005, 2002, 2008, 2012, and then the biggest one came 2017. And this was over 750,000 people being forced to migrate, forced to walk across jungles, forced to walk across sea with nothing but the clothes on themselves, with nothing. The Rohingya people had lands, they had acres of land, they had properties, they had livestock. They had to leave their entire livelihood behind, and they were forced to go into Bangladesh. And
So
this was all done systematically.
So we're seeing, a genocide and an ethnic cleansing by everything you're explaining. You said that they want to cleanse, Burma of the Rohingya population, which is literally they're committing a genocide against the Rohingya population. We'll be speaking more about the human rights violations that we're seeing against the Rohingyas right after our short break. You're watching us on Galaxy 19 Satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, and Roku. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NextGen. We're here with Janjan Maran and Sirazul Islam speaking on the issues of the Rohingya population and the crimes that are being committed against them. We were actually supposed to take a commercial break 10 minutes ago, but this conversation has just been so enlightening, so informative, packed with information and emotion because of the fact that we have a survivor with us here on the panel. We have an activist and an advocate whose people have faced similar crimes against them as well. Now, I want to ask both of you, is this truly a religious conflict that we're seeing? You talked about the Islamophobia that's being perpetuated. Is it a religious conflict, or is it just being portrayed as one?
I
don't want to say flat out no.
No, you could go. No. Please,
Yeah.
please, you go first.
Yeah, it's definitely not as a religious, fight or battle as it is portrayed to be, because it's just under the guise of Buddhism, and under the guise that, oh, we are attacking because they are Muslim or because they are Christian. And Christians actually make up 4% of the country, which also includes Kachins, and Muslims make up 4% as well. And the majority is 98%. So it's easy to use this as a narrative, to explain why these hate crimes are occurring. But that's really not it. And I want to quickly also answer the previous question and say that there have been protests on the ground in order to combat this stuff, and journalists as well. They've been really going on the rise in order to just expose what this Burmese military has been doing, and the government as well being illicit in it, sort of, and actually just going along with it because the military is part of the government. And I also want to just briefly touch upon the history of Rohingya. So they actually, according to the stuff that I've read, they actually came into Burma around even as early as the 12th century and 14th centuries. And if I look at my own Kachin people's history, they came into Burma around the 1400s as well. So that could even be arguably later than the Rohingya themselves. And regardless of that, the thing that happened in 1948 is that, these certain ethnic groups were recognized, and Kachin happened to be one of them. So even as a recognized tribe in Burma, Kachin people do have citizenship, yet Rohingya people do not, even though they've been around the same time as Kachin people, and all these other tribes have been in Burma. So I just think it's, it's just really crazy. And I also wanted to just, describe a little bit about this discrimination towards darker skinned people and Rohingya and Muslims or Indians. It's kind of stemming back from colonial times as well, and you can see just how much this history is impacting the present. You see this in how back then, because Burma was a colony, is actually under India. It was considered a subset of India, sort of, and it wasn't even Burma yet. But because of this, the Indians were more favored under the British eyes. So, and if you were going to be traveling within borders, there was actually no such thing as borders yet. So, traveling from India to Burma would be considered internal traveling. And so, that's how most of the Rohingya also got in as well, maybe from those times. But even Rohingya were there before then, before those colonial times, because if you look back at the 12th century, Rohingya people themselves say that they are actually descendants of Arab traders and Persian traders who came in, way back then, centuries ago. So, just having this colonization period really amplified, I guess, the move of those people around borders as well. And so that's how you see, there's this discrimination against them now because of this hatred that was kind of instilled against them during the colonial times. And because of this favoritism, as well as World War II, where the Rohingya and I believe, some other kind of people, maybe in Arakan State, also sided with the British during World War II, but the Burmese sided with the Japanese. And so there's also this deep-rooted hatred because of that. And so they see themselves as enemies because Burma joined themselves with Japan for a while in order to gain their independence from the British. But that's just how things are playing out even now to this day.
Jen, your voice, I don't know if that was just on my side, but it's just cutting just a bit. So maybe you want to just, fix the audio a little bit. Another thing I always say to people, the British colonized our lands and they left. I'm an Indian, so I know where you're coming from. At the same time, it's our minds are still colonized. I mean, we see that, with the racism that's ingrained in our own communities. And then we see that at a larger scale as well, right, with the Burmese population. You talked about how colonization kind of led to the situation that we're seeing today. But what I want to ask both of you is, what are these specific human rights that are being violated? You spoke a little bit, Sirazul, about the history that happened before, but currently today, what are those human rights violations that we're seeing perpetuated against the Rohingya population?
I think to better answer your question is that if we go through every single article of the human rights, they've all been violated against the Rohingyas. Um, like instead of me specifically saying, "Oh, this," it's like the better answer would be what hasn't been violated, which is nothing. For example, the right to education. The Rohingya people are not allowed to go outside to educate themselves. Then they don't have adequate provisions of education. The apartheid system in Burma, they separate, like I mentioned before, they separate Burmese people, they separate the Rakhine students from the Rohingya students. So, for example, this is all from a UN fact-finding mission as well. The following example I'll give you is students. The Rohingya students are made to sit at the back of the classroom. The Rohingya students are not given enough attention. And most of the time, when there are schools in villages or nearby villages, it only operates if teachers decide to come in and teach them, which is highly unlikely for many people. We're not allowed to go outside to college or to university. The nearest university is the University of Sitwe, where not many actually, where a few handful of Rohingyas managed to get an admission, but by taking up a Burmese identity, not as Rohingyas, but as Burmese people. And and so you can see the Rohingyas at every stage of their education, at every stage of their life, they're limited, they're capped. And even when they go to university, they're in fear of their life. They're in fear that, tomorrow someone might come and know that you're a Rohingya and you might get excluded. And this happened in both Burma, where there was a massive exclusion, a massive wave of exclusion of Rohingya students from university, and in Bangladesh. So the same situation in Bangladesh. Um, um, Rohingya people take up Bangladeshi identity in order to educate themselves, because they believe education is the only way forward. They want to make a life, a prospect out of life for right now. But the Bangladeshi authorities set up a special operation, a special police operation, just to find Rohingyas who are in school in Bangladeshi host communities. And this led to the 2018/19 massive exclusion wave, where many Rohingya students, both from colleges, high schools, and universities, were excluded. And many of them were my friends. For example, one of them were a law. She was a law student, and she was in her first year of law, and so was I. And at the exact same time, she was excluded. Why? Because she was a Rohingya. People didn't look past her identity. They didn't see that she was a women's rights leader. They didn't see that she was helping people learn English. She was giving English classes in Cox's Bazar. They didn't see all the good stuff she was doing, and that she was a brilliant student. The only thing they saw was that she was a Rohingya and excluded her. That's
Yeah.
just the educational aspect. And there's many other human rights, all the articles I could go through and give you all the examples, but we'd be here all day.
Yeah. And even in 2019, right, Bangladesh refused, it said that it's not going to accept any more, Rohingyas anymore, right? So how has this affected the refugee crisis when Bangladesh, who's been accepting, we have, 600,000 just in one camp, and now it's saying that it's not going to accept any more refugees? How has this affected the Rohingya people, the Rohingya population?
Um, the first thing I would like to say is I would like to thank Bangladesh from the bottom of my heart for everything they have done. We recognize that they're an already poor country, an already overpopulated country, and they've done the best they can. However, that we cannot afford to provide them with impunity, because the crisis was not started by them. The crisis, we all agree, was started by the Burmese authority, by the Burmese military, and because of them, ethnic minorities, especially the Rohingyas, have had to migrate out of the country. Because of them, we don't have a home. However, Bangladesh turning away refugees, Bangladesh uh, uh, violating actually human rights within the camps, it's not right, and it shouldn't be overlooked, and we shouldn't shy away from this sensitive topic just because Bangladesh gave us shelter. We are grateful to them, but we must speak about this sensitive topic. For example, just to talk about the refugee crisis and how it's impacted. Bangladesh turned away a boat that was on sea for 40 days for an additional 7 days. And when Bangladesh finally took it in, what they did was this was recently in 2020. They took these Rohingyas into Bashan Shah. This roughly translated, it comes to the floating island. This island has been for around 11 to 15 years, and it has never been inhabited before by any humans, and it has not been deemed safe by Human Rights Watch or by any other human rights organization. And what they did was they took these Rohingyas into Bashan Shah for quarantining period, but this was done without the knowledge of the Rohingyas itself, or without the knowledge of or acceptance of their relatives. So and they're in Bashan Shah now, and any other Rohingyas that present with COVID-19 symptoms or that come from boat are being sent to Bashan Shah and it's an unsafe island. And this has two effects. The first effect is obvious. People are not going to come forward with COVID-19 symptoms, even if they know what's going on, because they're scared that they're going to be separated away from their family. They're scared that, or they're going to go into Bashan Shah and never come back. And Bashan Shah is a 1 hour boat ride away. You can't take human rights watches, NGOs, human rights group, the UN can't travel there to give them care packages, or travel there to provide them with adequate protection. So you have that aspect of it, and then you have the other aspect is that Bangladesh is trying to offload Rohingyas away from their watch onto an island, which is highly unethical, and it takes away the credibility of Bangladesh, because Sheikh Hasina, the prime minister of Bangladesh, we gave her the status as the mother of humanity because of everything she's done. But when they're turning away Rohingya refugees, when they're clearly in violation of international laws, because these refugees, they're not coming because they want to, they're forced to. They're asylum seekers, and international law clearly states if you have asylum seekers coming to seek asylum within your country, you have a responsibility to accept them. So them turning away these Rohingyas they're in clear violation. And if I have the time quickly, it's not just Bangladesh that are currently turning away the Rohingyas to exacerbate the refugee crisis. Other countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, these authorities are turning away Rohingya boats. They're not allowing asylum seekers to seek asylum in Malaysia, in Thailand, in Indonesia. However, on the other side, you have amazing humanity stories, such as this was a few weeks ago when Indonesian authorities refused to take the Rohingya refugees seeking asylum into their countries. The local community, the local host group got up and they stood against the government. They were like, no, this is incorrect. This isn't ethical. They went and pulled the boat to shore themselves. These are just common people.
Local.
These are humans, and these are locals. They went and pulled the boat to shore. They gave them food, protection, and shelter. So on one side, you could see the contrasting reaction to to the refugee crisis.
And
The
Saraza,
what
we'll continue to actually speak about this and continue to speak about the reaction of other communities and how we can do some grassroots efforts, some groundwork to help the Rohingya population. We'll be right back after our short break. Welcome back to NextGen. We're here with Jan Maran and Sirazul Islam. we spoke on the impacts, the human rights violations, where Srazal said that, which human right is not being violated, right? There's just too many to speak on. But Janjan, I want to ask you, what are some organizational efforts that are being done to help the Rohingya population, if any, right? Can you speak on that?
Yeah, definitely. So I was just doing some reading before this, and I found out that World Health Organization operates in there, and so does Save the Children, and as well as what's it called? It's like a Bangladesh, no, not Bangladesh. I think it is Bangladeshi Rotaract club or something like that. It's something to do with like Bangladesh Rotaract Mavericks, something like that. It's along the lines of that. But I know about that because I have a friend who referred me to you guys. He's from Yale, and he works with the Rotary Club from Yale, which is in partnership with them, and he does a lot of fundraising with them. So that's how I know that they're on the ground there, as well as Doctors Without Borders.
And
I also want to speak a little bit on the human.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sorry.
No,
I
go
want to
ahead.
just add on to like what Cyril was saying. Basically, to sum up the humanitarian or like the crimes against humanity, it's basically like arson, rape, murder, and extrajudicial killings. Mass killings, all that stuff, and torture. That's like those are the main things. Like all summed up humanitarian suffering that's going on. Not just for the Rohingyas, but also people inside Burma. And the people inside Burma have also been experiencing this for decades, and they've been fighting with the Burmese military, just like actively, because in 1948, after they received independence, there was this thing called the Panglong Agreement, which actually said that these ethnic minorities would get their own autonomous states, which they till this day do not have, and that's why they are still fighting. And even though the Rohingya were not even part of that Panglong Agreement, you see how whether or not you're a citizen doesn't even matter in Burma, because you're going to be targeted by the Burmese military regardless. So it also goes back to like the previous question you asked about, is this a religious conflict? No, it's not. It's purely like along the lines of ethnic tensions. And another thing I also wanted to mention is that that this isn't a religious conflict when you see that even like the Buddhist military themselves is attacking Buddhist Rakhine people as well, because like the Rakhine people are also majority Buddhists. And yeah, it doesn't matter if you're Buddhist or Muslim, Christian. You see this happening with all kinds of people inside Burma.
So as young people, right, where do we stand in all of this? How can we make a change, especially if we don't live in those communities? I know both of you are outside of the Rohingya community. You're in UK, and Jan is in US. So tell me, what do we do? What is some action items that we can do to help the Rohingya population?
Um, I think Janja would remember the first time I was on call with her. I said to her, you're living in the USA, the United States of America, like how glorified it is, and like all the savior of the world and whatnot. But within that, it comes the responsibility, being one of the greatest global superpowers, the UK and the US. We come with the responsibility to speak up, because whether we like it or whether anyone likes it or not, we have the most impact with what goes on in the world. I give Janjan the example, like, oh, I'm following American politics. I have to follow American politics because it's gonna have an impact on me, both in the UK, in Bangladesh, in Burma, because and the same with the UK. The thing is, we're at the liberty to have the most impact, and we need to most we need to optimize or utilize our opportunities, and this comes with two sides, I think. The first is, I'll be brief. The first is, we need to raise awareness. For example, we have this platform, we have the opportunity to raise awareness. We can do it in school, we can do it in colleges, universities, we can do it online. If I was in Bangladesh, I would not have been able to speak to you today. But I'm in the UK, and I can. There are there's loads of teenagers out there who care about the world, who care about the Rohingya issue, who care about the Palestinian, the Uyghurs, the Yemeni issue. And this is why we raise awareness. And I think I'll leave you with this analogy. The thing is, I'm a really big fan of history. So, and I always used to think, oh, the Holocaust went on, the apartheid went on. There's so many like great evils that went on in the world. What would I have done in the Holocaust? Would I have spoken out, or like If I was there, would I have had made a change? And then I just tell myself, I tell that to my friends, like, hold on, stop what you're doing right now and think. Look outside and think what you're doing right now is what you would have done when the Holocaust was going on. Because the Holocaust was a genocide that happened 75 years ago. The Rohingya issue is a genocide happening right now. Loads of, like, there's over 200,000 Rohingyas still stuck in IDP camps. There's Rohingyas at the end of artillery shells. There's Rohingyas at the end of rape, murder. Still, genocide is going on today. So, as young people, it's our responsibility to think: do you want to stand on the right side of history when the time comes? Do you want to uh, 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 do something to prevent a genocide or to help an ethnic minority? And the final thing is that I live by this principle that history will record the crimes of bystanders. And now it's your choice whether you want to be a criminal or not, whether you want to be a bystander and a silencer, or you want to speak out and do something about the world that you're living in. Because the Rohingya issue is not subjective. It's not just because we're at the end of it doesn't mean you won't be at the end of it tomorrow. It is going to impact everyone and everyone. And if we let this go, if we don't speak about this, it's going to set a dangerous precedent for the future. We promised ourselves 75 years ago, never again. Since then, my people have been killed. The Rwandans have been killed. People in Darfur went through genocide. The Bosnians went through genocide. Our promise is nothing if we don't stick to it. So that's my advice. Raise out, use your voice, utilize your privileges. Thank you.
Jen, I see you nodding along to all of that, and I want you to give off your final message before we, bid farewell to our audience.
Yeah, to Cyril, I just want to say, preach, brother, because I could not have said that any better. Like, I agree with everything that he said. And as an American myself, I just want to say to American people, especially, use your power to, leverage your lobbying power. That is so powerful here in the United States. We live in a democracy, a democratic nation, and like not being, vocal about these issues is just a waste of your privilege and your freedom as an American citizen inside this country. So, learn more about your rights and learn more about how your government works, because it's designed in a way that you can go literally up into like those offices for your senators and representatives and just talk about them, the issues that, matter to you, and just basically complain to them and ask them to do something about it, demand them, and I myself was one of those people who really didn't know that I had these privileges until, recently. And so I've been really just taking advantage of it, using it all up as much as I can. And I encourage everyone in America to do the same, and anyone anywhere really where your democracy like works the same way or your government works the same way. I also just want to say that, the suffering, that's what's happening with the Rohingya. I'm really glad that we're getting like this kind of coverage that we're working towards. And I also just want to use this platform as well to just raise awareness about what's happening for the people inside Burma as well, the ethnic groups. While the Rohingya have been able to really get this sort of attention because it hit them the hardest, that doesn't mean that, the ethnic minorities inside the country are also not suffering. Like, they've been suffering for decades, and it just happens to be that they don't get the same kind of media attention because it's like not as severe or like as quick as it happened to the Rohingya, even though it has been like prolonged for so long. So yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for this time, and I really do encourage everyone. Also, stand, little plug. I'm with STAND, the student-led movement to end genocide and mass atrocities. So please, please, please feel free to join us. Reach out to me. My email is janjandidi@gmail.com, janjandidi@gmail.com. So anyone can literally join. Your student, like, you basically get in the network, and you're going to be advocating alongside a lot of other student activists who are very passionate about all these kind of issues dealing with genocide and mass atrocities.
Guys, go follow Stand, like Jen said. And Sarazal and Jen, this conversation has been absolutely enlightening. Thank you so much to the both of you. It's an absolute honor for me to have both of you today. And to our audience who've been, staying tuned for the past 2 weeks, thank you for watching us. And until next week with a new theme and new guests, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all.